Chapter 666 The Assembly 3. Why is it taking Kevin so long? During my conversation with Malik al-Shayatin, in which I was trying to buy as much time as possible, I sneaked a look at the time on my watch. 10 minutes had already passed since Hemlock had appeared and nothing had happened. Did something go wrong with the operation? Kevin was supposed to be on his way to killing Malik al-Shayatin, who was hiding not so far from where we were at the time according to what I knew about the situation. He was the only one who knew the precise location. I wasn't even sure of it myself. Given that Hemlock was still seated at the oval table alongside everyone else, it was clear that Kevin had not yet made his move. Is it possible that he ran into some problems and it's taking him more time than it is supposed to? This was the most likely possibility. Kevin, in my opinion, was in no real danger at any point. Malik al-Shayatin would have already vanished by now had he found out that Kevin had attacked him. And taking into consideration the fact that Kevin was solely performing this action based on his memories, there was no way that Hemlock could know what was coming for him. It was simply impossible. I guess I'll just stall for a bit more time. It wasn't that I really minded, but I was rapidly running out of topics to discuss in order to kill time. Octavius, to my great relief, came to my aid in the nick of time. For some inexplicable reason, it felt to me as though he was in on the whole situation. I'm imagining things, right? Is there anything you hope to accomplish by remaining here? I'm certain that you didn't just show up to listen to our conversation. If you truly desired to hear what we had to say, you would not have divulged your identity so early. As expected of the strongest human, you're very perceptive. Hemlock clapped twice, his back lying on the leather chair. Initially, I intended to come here to confuse the minds of everyone present. I wanted you guys to question yourselves and perhaps convert a few of you to our side, but I changed my mind. Hemlock gave me a friendly smile as he slowly turned his head in my direction and looked at me. As the ominous foreboding I was experiencing became clearer, I felt shivers run down my entire body. But I changed my mind. Not too long ago, a small bird told me something, and let's just say I discovered something even more entertaining. The instant he said those words, my pupils constricted violently. Specifically, when he uttered the phrase "little bird," the puzzle pieces in my mind began to fall into place and my breathing became rougher. I muttered two words without hesitation in my mind. Monarch's indifference. My vision turned black. The exact length of time that I was unconscious was a mystery to me, but the instant that I regained consciousness, I found myself standing in front of a pitch-black void. One that I was all too familiar with. After making a right turn, I walked in that direction without giving it much thought. With every step that I took, I had the sensation of something warm enveloping my entire body. In a short amount of time, the pleasant warmth morphed into something intolerable as a searing pain began to spread across all of my skin. But it didn't matter to me. I kept moving forward regardless, not paying the slightest bit of attention to the pain. This little pain was incomparable to the pain that my mind and body went through every day. My dogged determination paid off, and it wasn't long before I spotted a tiny white orb about the size of a star way off in the distance. The orb grew steadily more expansive as I proceeded forward with my journey. I had no idea how far I had to travel before I would reach the orb, but as soon as I got within a few feet of it, I could see that it was covered in thin black threads that had seeped into the white surface of the orb and was riddled with a variety of cracks. A person who looked an awful lot like me was standing not too far away from the orb and staring at it with a blank and dull expression. I started walking in his direction and stopped when I was in the same space as him. When I turned my head to look at the orb as well, I noticed that it was reflecting images. In particular, I could see Kevin's face, which was staring into the orb. The whiteness of Kevin's face was accentuated by the fact that his body was shivering and his lips quivered. Closing my eyes, I spoke up. As expected, it was you, wasn't it? I spoke in a calm manner. The reason why Hemlock was so calm and why Kevin had been held up for so long. This was all a scheme my other self had planned in order to kill Kevin. In spite of my composure, I was aware of a searing rage permeating each and every part of my body. The other version of myself slowly turned his head and looked at me with the same expressionless gaze he had always worn. You should be thankful to me. At that very moment, every fiber of my being wanted to let out a shout, but I restrained myself. I had long since concluded that shouting would only give the impression that I was losing control of the situation and would contribute absolutely nothing to anything. The only thing I could do was keep my composure and reason through everything that was happening. I had to rid my mind of the pointless emotions clouding my judgment to effectively find a solution to the problem. If Kevin dies, you will be able to live and I will be able to have my wish of dying fulfilled. 2 birds with 1 stone. What's the point of staying alive if I'm going to die regardless? What was the point of surviving if, in the end, I was still going to die at Jezebeth's hands? Consider yourself lucky that you will live a few years longer than expected. Very kind of you. I responded sarcastically while anxiously staring at the orb in front of me. In my view, Kevin's face was directly facing the orb, and it appeared for a moment that he was staring at me. My mind stirred when that thought occurred to me, but when I looked beside me and saw the other me still calmly looking at the orb, I became unsure of what I saw. What's going on? Kevin's voice shook as he knelt on the ground while holding a thin body in his arm. Emma. Kevin yelled her name once, and as he did so, tears began to form in the inner corners of his eyes, and he began to lose his ability to focus. His face, which was extremely pale, looked at Emma's with a look of despondency plastered all over it as he gazed at her. While her eyes were absently gazing upward, he tenderly stroked her cheek. Shit. After all that I did to distance myself from you. Shit. Her breathing was very shallow, which indicated that she was still alive. However, it was abundantly clear that she did not have a lot of time left to live. Because Kevin had struck her right in the heart and because the poison had left a clear imprint in her body, there was no chance that she could survive. The thought caused Kevin's mind to become disorganized, as evidenced by his paler-than-usual face and the churning of his stomach. The tears that began to form in the creases of his eyes moved more quickly down his cheeks, and it appeared as though the world was losing its color to him as they did so. How is this possible? As Kevin brought Emma's body closer to his in an embrace, he mumbled something out loud. Where is Malik al-Shaitan? Why are you here? What's going on? In addition to being extremely pale, he also appeared to be extremely lost. It's impossible for him to know that I'm doing this. Impossible. There was no one else besides Ren who was aware of what he had in store for the future. It was supposed to be a sneak attack, and it was something that he had done before in his memories, so he felt confident about it. Just where did I go? K. The expression on Kevin's face suddenly changed, and he turned his attention to Emma, who appeared to be trying to communicate with him. What? Are you trying to say something? Emma's body began to tremble in Kevin's arms, and just as he was wondering what was wrong with her, he felt a sudden, severe pain in his lower abdomen. PFTT. He spat out a mouthful of fresh blood and looked at Emma with a bewildered expression. What? Why? Coo. His shock was met with a menacing laugh, and Kevin watched as Emma's body began to transform into that of a humanoid creature with a black appearance that he was all too familiar with. On top of that, the environment started crumbling apart, and large metal pillars materialized in each of the room's 4 corners. His surroundings changed and he found himself trapped in what seemed to be a large cage. A rosy vaporous substance was seen emanating straight from the pillars and filling the entire room with its presence. As soon as Kevin saw the gas, his pupils began to constrict, and he took a few unsteady steps backward. Cough. Hallucinogen. Took some time, but he eventually realized that he had walked right into a trap. As he stumbled around on the ground and looked for something to support himself with, he covered his mouth with his hand, but blood began to leak out through the spaces between his fingers. The blood dropped all over the ground as he tried to find some stability. His vision was blurry and he could barely feel anything in his body. The dagger may not have struck him directly in the heart, but the poison he had used to coat it was currently seeping through his blood, rendering the mana in his body extremely difficult to control. I bet you didn't see that one coming. In the midst of his struggle, a sinister voice reached his ears. Kevin barely had time to look up before he noticed the demon known as Everblood slowly approaching him. Everblood pulled his head back slightly and moved his face closer to Kevin as he came to a stop a few steps away from him. His mouth was twisted into a twisted smile that reached all the way to the corners of his eyes. As expected of him, this is fun. So very fun. He swung his hand downward while extending it into the air, revealing his pointed nails that shone brightly under the lights. Now be a good boy and die. Chapter 667 Scary. 1. The void was enveloped in a chilly stillness. I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy as I stared at the white orb that was in front of me and took in everything. After seeing Everblood appear and Kevin get stabbed by the same dagger he used to kill Malik al-Shaytan, I felt an overwhelming urge to hurry over and give him a helping hand. But, despite everything that was happening, I did not take any action. My mind kept going back to the look Kevin had given me earlier. It wouldn't leave my thoughts no matter how hard I tried. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I had the distinct impression that he was staring right at me during that brief moment our eyes met. Was it just me? Or was he really looking at me? So how was it possible? The source of this content is frubuvel.cm. It couldn't be that, right? When I caught a glimpse of the other version of myself on the edge of my field of vision, I immediately had an implausible thought cross my mind. No, it can't be. I quickly discarded the thought. Just the idea made my spine tingle. There was no way Kevin was capable of making such a plan. Simply no way. You seem rather calm watching your friend die before your own eyes. The sound of my own voice snapped me out of my thoughts, and I turned my head to look at my other self, whose gaze was still loitering all over the orb that was in front of us. There was an unwavering serenity in his gaze as he watched Kevin's condition deteriorate before his eyes in a painfully slow manner. I shook my head. What am I meant to do? You tell me. Kevin is currently too far away for me to reach, and I am unaware of his precise location. By the time I reach his location, he will likely already be dead, so what am I supposed to do? Then why did you come here? Out of desperation to know who's responsible for his death. My lips pursed and I didn't say anything else, my eyes turning back toward the giant white orb. Everblood had his hand raised and was about to slash out at Kevin, whose body had become completely limp, and his eyes had lost all clarity at this very moment. My fists clenched together when I saw Kevin's helpless figure. Although I did have a plan for rescuing Kevin from the predicament, the image of his face kept playing over and over in my head. It dispelled all previous thoughts and forced me to continue watching the scene unfold. Damn it, I hope I'm not imagining things. My teeth clenched tightly. Everblood, abort. I was momentarily startled out of my thoughts by a sudden shout, and when I turned around, I was astounded to see the other version of myself staring at the orb with a solemn expression on his face. It's too late. The void that the other me and I were in was suddenly shaken by a voice, and Kevin, who had been lifeless just a few seconds earlier, abruptly raised his hand and grabbed hold of Everblood's face with his hand. A mysterious white haze erupted from his hand and engulfed every part of Everblood's body. His crimson-red eyes shone with an intense crimson hue and the void shook fiercely. What's going on? It felt as though I was in the epicenter of an earthquake as I stumbled a couple of steps while attempting to get a proper foothold. On the other hand, the other version of me was able to maintain a secure foothold. Throughout the entire time, his gaze was directed in Kevin's direction. He can make such a face? I was immediately taken aback by the expression he was making. How should I describe it? It was twisted. Extremely twisted. It was as if I was staring into the eyes of a living embodiment of hatred and malice. Like. A dull metallic clanking sound reverberated throughout the void, and the area around the other me began to agitate. It's as I feared. The idea that I had previously written off resurfaced in my mind. The instant chains began forming in the area around the other me, and I turned to look at Kevin with a perplexed expression. He's changed. At this point, I realized that the Kevin before me was not the same Kevin that I had known or that had appeared in my memories. He was a different Kevin. A version of Kevin that my other self had never encountered. Arg. The void shook and the other version of me fought against the chains that attacked him like vicious snakes, shackling his arms and legs and pulling him backward. There's no use struggling. I went over to the other version of myself which was struggling furiously against the chains. Shut up. I knew that the chains wouldn't be able to get rid of him and that they were only strengthening the seal that was binding him, but when I looked at the pure desperation and hatred on his face, I knew that whatever was going to happen to him next wasn't going to be anything but pleasant. He was probably going to go through another form of torture, but there was nothing I could nor wanted to do. He was me, but I didn't care about him. If possible, please die. No. As his body was dragged back into the void and his eyes turned blood red, I could clearly feel the helplessness and madness that was tinted in his voice. This was the sound of a broken man. A man who had been through more *T than anyone else but who was once again compelled to live under the torments of the binds that were cursing him. The real me. My last glimpse was of his hand, which appeared to be reaching out from the depths of the void in an attempt to seize hold of something that would release it from its shackles. Unfortunately, he was unable to find whatever it was that he was looking for, and he vanished into thin air almost immediately after that, bringing the place into an immediate hush. Your real target had never been Malik Al-Shayatin, was it? I broke the silence almost immediately after it arrived, gazing deeply at the white orb in front of me. At that moment, Kevin's eyes directly met mine and he nodded his head. Yeah. As expected. I lowered my head in thought. Taking a deep breath, I tried to make sense of everything that had just happened, and my heart dropped for some reason. For you to have predicted that my other self would have tried to interfere with your plan to kill him and bait him into a trap designed to directly seal him. How did he know that the other me was going to show up? How did he know that he would suggest such a plan? This had never happened in the past, so how was he able to predict this? It doesn't make sense. The questions inside of my head were endless. I couldn't make heads or tails of what was happening, and my head was throbbing. How? That was all I could think of at the moment. So many questions, yet not a single answer. I paused and looked up. Who are you? Mirrored over Everblood's pupils were two shiny pupils that glowed a crimson-red hue. When confronted with such a gaze, Everblood felt a shiver run directly through his body. Despite this, he was helpless. He was completely at the mercy of Kevin, whose eyes were piercing through his very being. He seemed to be communicating with someone at the moment, but he couldn't make out who he was talking to. The connection with Ren had already disappeared, and he was in no way strong enough to fight against the current Kevin. He was basically a sitting duck. There was nothing he could do. Yet for some reason, Everblood was not in the least bit scared. Everblood showed no emotion, possibly because he knew his life was about to end or because he found the prospect of Ren's momentary defeat amusing, but he did not put any resistance. Within a minute's time, Kevin brought his head back and his eyes regained some clarity. He stared directly at Everblood, who smiled. Have you finished? Kevin didn't answer, and Everblood let out a strained laugh. Quack cuckoo. This is good. This is good. He extended his hands in a way that made it seem as though he wanted to hug Kevin. As he smiled savagely, a sudden spray of dark blood covered Kevin's entire face and his face was covered in blood. Piffy. Everblood became aware of something penetrating his body, and it wasn't long before Kevin extracted his core from inside of him. Everblood's last memory was of Kevin's icy voice as he flicked his wrist, causing a small device connected to the core to explode. Something isn't a surprise when you know it's going to happen. I know. Everblood smiled and the world around him quaked. Boomy. A powerful explosion ripped through the building's lower levels, causing structural damage to the structure's foundation. The building began to lean to one side, and the pieces of furniture were thrown so far that they shattered against the windows, falling into the streets below that had already fallen into a panic. Kevin remained in the same position that he had been in before and continued to stare at Everblood's face with a face that was devoid of any expression whatsoever. No one could tell what he was thinking at the moment. Upon closer inspection, blood started leaking out from the side of his lips. He raised his hand to wipe the blood away. It's over. At that very moment, he was experiencing a diverse range of emotions all at once. He experienced both some relief and sadness at the same time. Relief from his plan working out and sadness for something entirely different. He lowered his head and slowly pulled out the dagger that had been embedded in his lower abdomen. Shortly after, he drank a potion and his injuries slowly started to heal. There's not much time left. Boomy. 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 As the structure Kevin was in completely caved in, explosions could be heard going off outside and could be felt throughout the entire city. Kevin had long expected this to happen once he killed Everblood, and he had purposely allowed this to happen. There was only one reason for this. Everblood was bound by a mana contract, the one that dictated the truce between the Union and the Monolith. This was in contrast to Kevin, who, because he wielded the powers of the Akashic laws, was not bound by mana contracts. Everblood's actions constituted a direct violation of the mana contract, and despite the fact that this breach wouldn't exactly do a lot of damage to the Monolith because it was done individually by someone who acted contrary to the wishes of the Monolith, the damage still existed. The contract was fair, stating that if there was a breach of the contract, the monolith would suffer damage that was equal to 5 times the amount of damage that the human domain experienced. Everblood was not a spy, and he was not coerced into committing such crimes by Kevin. Therefore, the monolith would directly bear the full brunt of his actions, which was Kevin's intention from the very beginning. That being said, Kevin wasn't heartless enough to kill all the innocent people for the sake of his plan. Since the contract stipulated that the monolith would sustain 5 times the damage inflicted by the breach, Kevin only needed the people to be injured and not directly killed, so he made preparations beforehand. Cough. The color left Kevin's face abruptly and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. At this point in time, the building had already begun its descent toward the ground, and just prior to the building's complete collapse, Kevin disappeared into thin air. Boomy. Chapter 668 Scary 2. Are you here to kill time, or do you intend to declare war on us directly? I wonder about that. Don't feign ignorance. It was the sound of Octavius and Hemlock's voices that roused me awake. When I opened my eyes, I noticed that the scene was continuing to unfold exactly as it had been when I had closed them. I lowered my head to check the time. Only 2 minutes have passed. I was surprised to see that not much time had passed since I had activated Monarch's indifference and that the scene had not changed much since I had left. You'll find out in due time. These were the words that Kevin told me before ending the connection. What did they mean? I didn't know. There were so many questions that I had, yet at the same time had no one to answer them. Whatever was happening was fucked up. All this secrecy bullshit, I was fucking tired of it. In the end, I'm still probably not strong enough. I silently clenched my fist under the table. All it took was a deep breath to calm my nerves down. There was something else that needed my immediate attention at the moment. I don't get it. Why are you people willing to throw away your lives in such a reckless way? Do you have any idea how formidable the Demon King really is? Do you honestly believe that you have even the smallest chance of beating him? What I'm doing is for the good of humanity, which you guys are unwilling to acknowledge. I have already spoken with the Demon King, and he has promised me that if we choose to submit to him, he will provide us with a land where we can survive in the future. Why must we waste so many lives when the solution is right in front of us? Are you really willing to let our race go extinct? The air resounded with Hemlock's voice. His voice had a peculiar allure that briefly hypnotized me, but I was able to quickly shake off the effect and my gaze fell on Octavius. For some reason, Octavius was strangely calm. Even stranger was the fact that he appeared to be quietly listening to Hemlock's voice without any hints of rage or impatience. The Octavius that I was familiar with would have almost certainly put an end to Hemlock's life right then and there. However, for some inexplicable reason, he had remained perfectly still the entire time. For some strange reason, it appeared as if they were both stalling for time. It can't be right? Another ridiculous notion occurred to me, and I turned my attention to the direction in which Octavius was sitting. What exactly are you planning? You seem to be waiting for something. I am. Hemlock's words were interrupted in the middle of his sentence. The expressions of the other people in the room began to shift at the same time that the muffled sound of explosions began to reverberate in the far distance. What's going on? What's happening? The room didn't descend into chaos as one might have anticipated it would as a result of the unexpected situation. However, it was obvious that the people present weren't exactly unaffected by the situation, all taking out their phones to check what was going on. Unfortunately for them, the whole place was sealed. No one was able to communicate with the outside world for the moment. Everyone, please relax. There is no cause for concern. I will provide everyone present with an explanation at a later time. Yet again, he was able to calm the whole situation down. If it weren't for Octavius's voice, there was a good chance that some people would have already exited the building to see what was going on. With the same listless expression as before, he turned his head to look at Hemlock, who was seated on his chair with a blank expression on his face. I believe that you have been tricked. Hemlock's right eyebrow twitched slightly in response to Octavia's voice. I believe so too. Hemlock nodded his head in agreement. In spite of the fact that he appeared to be calm on the surface, I could sense the anger that was emanating from his voice. Clearly, he had not expected Everblood to go as far as blowing up half of the city. The repercussions of his actions weren't going to be very pleasurable. Pit. While Hemlock's finger drummed over the wooden desk, his gaze lingered over me for a brief moment, and then he suddenly dropped his head on the table. Thud. Everyone in the room was taken aback by his abrupt action, and when they turned to look at him, they discovered to their shock that his figure had already disintegrated all over the table. "He's left." Monica's voice echoed beside me. Following her voice, the entire room erupted in murmurs. From the sudden appearance of Hemlock to the explosions that echoed outside, a great deal transpired in the span of a few minutes, and it was unavoidable that everyone would be a little unnerved by what was occurring due to the rapidity with which it all occurred. "What do you think the explosions were?" Monica asked, her head raised to look up at me. I glanced at her from the corner of my eyes and shrugged my shoulders. "How should I know? Just like you, I've been trapped in this room the entire time. If you want to ask someone, he's your best shot at finding out what is going on." I nudged in Octavius's direction with my head, and Monica's head turned to gaze in his direction. At the moment, she wasn't the only one that was looking up at him. From a glance, I could count more than 10 of the people in the room already staring in his general direction, and the numbers steadily grew as time passed. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly tense, and before long, everyone's attention was drawn in Octavius's direction. "Octavius, you must know something about the situation, don't you?" Douglas, who sat in the chair directly to his left, was the first person to comment. A smattering of solemnity could be seen in his eyes at times when he gazed in Octavius's way. "You've said before that you would give us an explanation of what is going on. I'm sure you haven't forgotten what you said, right?" This time, a muscular man with fiery red hair and bushy eyebrows spoke. With his arms crossed and wearing a tight black suit, his basketball-sized muscles were accentuated by his attire, which seemed to be a size too small for him. The mere fact that he was a head taller than the majority of the room's occupants made him extremely intimidating. In fact, he appeared quite comical seated in his chair, which was obviously too small for him. Newman Jordan, the new 7th ranker. His presence was extremely oppressive, with the people around him put in a somewhat difficult spot. He was one of the few that didn't seem to be intimidated by Hemlock, his gaze remaining firm throughout the entire time. What was odd was the fact that he didn't do or say anything. Then again, he was probably wary of Hemlock, who was the strongest human in existence. "Calm down. I have already stated that I will provide you with an explanation, and I will. I am a man of my word." Octavius raised his hand, and the room fell into an immediate hush. Interlocking his fingers together, Octavius began to talk. "I've already stated that I wanted to discuss 2 topics with you guys before we were abruptly interrupted by, you already know who. It was something about an alliance, wasn't it?" Ivana Krala was the one to speak this time. Leaning back in her chair with her legs crossed and her glossy red hair falling over her shoulder, Ivana's disposition seemed wild and unrestrained. She was currently donning a one-piece black dress that accentuated her great bodyline and muscular figure. Her lips were fuller than average, and the color of her pupils, which were yellow like Liam's, added to the allure of her otherwise lovely face. What made her stand out from the others were, in fact, her pupils, which were horizontal like a reptile's. Leaning forward on her extended elbow, she smiled, exposing her pearly white teeth. "Let me guess, for the next 10 minutes you will brief us on how the alliance is going to work before finally getting to the main point." Ivan's finger tapped on the table once. "And that is, you want to be the leader of this so-called alliance, am I correct?" As expected of her, she really doesn't give a single fuck about anything. There wasn't much that I knew about Ivana other than the fact that her personality was wild. She was one of the few SS rankers that didn't like to operate a guild and preferred to roam the world outside the human domain. In any event, she possessed the power to support her personality. There wasn't much anyone could do about her. "You're half correct." Octavius didn't seem to be the least bit offended by her words. He was once again shockingly calm. "Only half." Ivana's brow raised and Octavius nodded. "Yes, you're correct about the first part. The one about me going through the details of the alliance. If that's the case, I got the part about you wanting to be the leader of this alliance wrong?" "Correct." Octavius nodded, and everyone in the room showed surprised expressions. I too was somewhat shocked by this revelation. "What's going on?" I did say that Octavius's personality was different from what is typical because he was unusually calm, but the fact that he flat out refused to take on the role of the leader of the alliance was an excessively dramatic shift in his behavior. In all of my memories, he became the leader of the alliance. Everyone was aware of the fact that he enjoyed a position of authority due to his personality that thirsted for power. He hated anyone that challenged his position. hence his dislike for me. The union was supposed to be an organization with 7 heads, and each head was supposed to hold the same amount of power as the other heads, but everyone knew that this description was extremely inaccurate. Octavius was the one who truly held power within the union, and most high rankers knew this. The fact that he didn't want to be the leader of the alliance seemed too out of character for him. I wasn't the only one who thought this way, as the majority of people in the room appeared to partially concur with my thoughts. This doesn't have anything to do with Kevin, right? I had a sudden thought while I reached out for the glass of water positioned on the desk in front of me and took a sip. Although it is true that I do not wish to be the alliance leader, there is a very simple reason for this, and that's because I already have in mind a perfect person for the job. I can vouch for his strength and abilities, and I will assist him in the initial stages of his adjustment as alliance leader if need be. And in the background, Octavius's voice smoothly echoed in the air. The person whom I wish to be the alliance leader is Kevin Voss. PFFE. I spat out my drink. Chapter 669 Scary 3. PFE. I spat the water that was in my mouth, and I felt multiple eyes pause in my general direction. I looked at Octavius without paying any attention to the attention that was being directed toward me and set the glass back on the table. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't hearing wrongly. What did you just say? You've heard me already. I won't repeat myself. No, it's because I heard what you said that I'm asking this. What in the world was going on? I was completely taken aback by the unexpected disclosure, despite the fact that I had already had a hunch that this might happen. The clues were there, I just didn't want to believe them. How on earth did Kevin manage to sway the opinion of such a stubborn individual to side with him? Kevin Voss. Kevin Voss. Isn't he that little handsome fellow that I see in the billboards all the time? Ivana turned her attention to Octavius. The interest in her eyes was clear to see. Octavius merely spared her a glance before answering. I can vouch for his capabilities. He will make a great leader if you choose to elect him as one. Where is he at the moment? Chapter 669 Scary 3. PFE. I spat the water that was in my mouth, and I felt multiple eyes pause in my general direction. I looked at Octavius without paying any attention to the attention that was being directed toward me and set the glass back on the table. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't hearing wrongly. What did you just say? You've heard me already. I won't repeat myself. No, it's because I heard what you said that I'm asking this. What in the world was going on? I was completely taken aback by the unexpected disclosure, despite the fact that I had already had a hunch that this might happen. The clues were there, I just didn't want to believe them. How on earth did Kevin manage to sway the opinion of such a stubborn individual to side with him? Kevin Voss. Kevin Voss. Isn't he that little handsome fellow that I see in the billboards all the time? Ivana turned her attention to Octavius. The interest in her eyes was clear to see. Octavius merely spared her a glance before answering. I can vouch for his capabilities. He will make a great leader if you choose to elect him as one. Where is he at the moment? Ivana looked around the room, pausing briefly to take in each of the individuals who were present in the room. He's not here. Maximus, Gilbert's father and the current second-ranked hero, spoke up. His head was bowed and his arms were crossed as he sat to the right of Octavius. Raising his head slowly, he looked at Octavius and mumbled. His rank is not within the top 50, and so he is unqualified to be here. Not even in the top 50? The expression on Ivana's face and the manner in which she carried herself completely shifted, and her eyes started to lose focus. If he isn't even in the top 50, what qualifies him to be the alliance leader? If someone wants to be my leader, they have to be at least stronger than me. Since he's not here, it means that there is no need for us to discuss this any further. I'm not interested. Ivana relaxed her shoulders and closed her eyes as she reclined further back in her chair, her expression utterly displaying the absence of any interest in the topic that had been discussed earlier. One doesn't have to be the strongest to be the leader. Octavius rebuked her in a collected and level-headed manner. Unfortunately, it appeared as though his words had the opposite effect on the people who were present, as they all appeared to be staring at him in an odd manner. Is B okay? Although no one said it out loud, this was the thought that was clearly plastered all over their faces. I couldn't blame them. The way Octavius was acting was extremely out of character. It was as if all of a sudden your tough, no-bullshit teacher became friendly out of nowhere. It sent shivers down my spine. Are you actually Octavius? My attention was brought back to the room by Monica, who asked the one question that had been preoccupying the thoughts of each and every person in the room. Octavius frowned as his eyes traveled around the room and took in the expressions of everyone present. There is nothing wrong with me, he answered flatly. Extending his hand, he pressed the table in front of him. Since you guys don't believe me, I'll demonstrate exactly what Kevin is capable of doing. In the space directly in front of him, a holographic screen appeared to float. On it, images of buildings collapsing of their own accord while smoke spread through the air were shown. Everyone was immediately startled by what they were seeing. What's going on? Is this what is happening right now? As everyone in the room stared at the holographic display, they did so with a mixture of shock and bewilderment. Was this what the sound from before was? Octavius brought his hand up and pinched the holographic screen, which resulted in the image becoming magnified. Have a closer look. The image magnified, and everyone was able to get a distinct view of what was taking place beneath the debris of the collapsed buildings. People could be seen writhing on the ground with wounds all over their bodies, wailing for assistance and desperately looking through the rubble. Confusion continued to spread throughout the room as the moment progressed. Staring at each other, everyone wondered, what exactly is going on, and why was Octavius so fascinated by the pictures of the suffering people? Once more, everyone began to question whether or not this truly was the Octavius that they were familiar with. What is currently happening is something that Kevin planned. The following words he spoke caused the entire room to fall into complete silence. The pupils of some of the people in the room suddenly dilated. Before they could say anything else, Octavius continued to speak. Because this piece of information has not been disclosed to anyone but a select few, some of you might not be aware of this, but Kevin possesses the ability to completely be unaffected by mana contracts. This means that his actions will not compromise us in any way. When some of the people in attendance heard these words, they immediately displayed a startlingly different expression than before. Are you serious? How is this possible? How can someone be immune to mana contracts? What does that have anything to do with the situation? As soon as people started talking over one another, the room immediately descended into chaos. I sat quietly in my seat while this was going on and crossed my arms together. Throughout the entire time I didn't say anything and just remained quiet. Because I was, to some extent, already familiar with Kevin's circumstances, I was not the least bit taken aback by the information that was revealed. The same could not be said for the other individuals, who began to speak over one another. It doesn't seem like much, but if I gave it some more thought, I'm realizing just how significant of an advantage this is. Especially considering that the ceasefire would still be in effect for a week. There was still an abundance of time available to inflict significant damage on the monolith without suffering any repercussions in return. Don't tell me this ability of his is what prompted you to recommend him as the leader of the Alliance? Maximus spoke up, his face dark. Clearly, he wasn't all too pleased with the sudden development. No. Octavius shook his head and he pointed at the holographic screen. It's because he has caused the most damage to the monolith and has the best chance of defeating them. Take a look at all of the injured. Do you see any dead? Everyone's attention was drawn back to the holographic image, and it was there that they noticed a thin layer of blood-red film covering the bodies of those who had been injured. This was the first time that anyone had noticed the film covering the bodies of those who had been injured, and they were rightfully taken aback. Octavius quickly cleared their doubts. Some of you may have wondered why Kevin is currently absent, and the explanation is simple. It's not because he isn't strong enough, but because there is something else that needs his immediate attention. During our meeting, he went out of his way to have the monolith detonate some of the strategically placed bombs they had placed throughout the city. Due to his knowledge of the bombs' precise locations, he was able to keep everyone safe while inflicting substantial contract-related damage on the monolith by detonating the bombs and keeping the citizens safe. If that's not the end. Octavius's head turned and paused on me. Kevin Voss is the real mastermind behind the elimination of all Union-infiltrated spies. Rin was merely covering for him so that Kevin could continue his operation with as much time as possible. Isn't that the case? Yeah. I nodded my head, all sorts of complicated thoughts crossing my mind. It appears that Kevin has convinced Octavius to join his side. I have no idea how, but things are beginning to make sense. It was clear that someone was trying to hide the fact that the spies who had previously held high-ranking positions in the Union had been killed. When I found out about the deaths for the first time, the first thing that came to my mind was that the Union was responsible for covering them up because they did not want to create any panic among the general population. Nevertheless, it was now abundantly clear to me that Octavius was the one who was behind it all, and it was all in an effort to help Kevin. What divine treasure did Kevin offer Octavius in order for him to be so submissive to him? Couldn't he have shared it with me? I really wanted to know. Are you claiming that you intentionally injured innocent civilians in order to cause a breach of contract and severely harm a small force of the monolith? The sound of Douglas's voice jolted me out of my reverie, and when I turned my head to look at him, I was taken aback by how dark his voice was. Something that I cannot recall ever seeing from him in the past. Not only was he not the only one with such an expression, but a number of other members who were considered to be more righteous also wore identical expressions. I did what needed to be done. No one died, and everyone who is injured will be properly compensated by the Union. And risked the lives of innocent people? Douglas smacked his hand against the table and raised his voice. You know very well that you can't pull this shit. If this gets out, the backlash alone will not be something we can bear. They aren't dead, are they? Isn't that what matters? What? Douglas looked at Octavius with an incredulous look. Just as he was about to say something, he was stopped by Octavius's raised hand. Stop. Octavius shifted his attention toward the other members present and started speaking. I would like to end this meeting on this note. I have already said what I wanted to say, and in the upcoming vote that will decide the leader of the alliance, if you choose to join, you should take into consideration voting for Kevin Voss. Pressing his hands against the side of the desk and standing up, Octavius murmured. I have done everything that I needed to do. It will be up to you whether you vote for him or not. When the time comes, you will know why this is the right decision. His figure disappeared right after that and the room turned quiet. Just like that, the assembly ended. Chapter 670, The Warmth of the Night. The next day. Phew, looks like this is the last of it. I took a moment to admire the view from my brand new apartment while I wiped the sweat that had accumulated on my forehead. I guess moving out was the right call. From where I was standing, I could see the city in all its glory, and the view was simply stunning. There was nothing to complain about. After returning from the assembly and discussing it with Amanda, I decided to vacate my previous apartment and move into a new one. This was a must as I was about to perform a dangerous operation on myself. With that being said, when I said move out, I simply relocated to the vacant apartment next door. There was no problem because Amanda owned the entire building. Alright, I guess I should get started. I flapped my tank top, creating a small wind that pushed up my chin and refreshed me. After that, I went to the beige couch that was perched atop a gray furry carpet in the center of the room. I sat down on the couch and took a pair of glasses from my dimensional space and put them on. It had to be noted that these were special glasses and weren't normal glasses. My eyes were perfect and I didn't need to have glasses in order to see. There was a glass table directly across from me and I swiped my hand over it. 3 books materialized on top of the table the moment I swiped my hand. The books were of 3 different colors: red, blue, and green. Engraved on the front covers of each book were 2 words: He style, Gravar style, Veja style. Who would have thought that I would one day take my time to learn all 3 of the techniques? I bitterly thought while I opened the first page of the Levi Shah style and tapped my glasses, which immediately scanned and copied the information that was displayed in front of me, highlighting the key points in front of me at the same time. Getting my hands on the Levi Shah style wasn't actually that hard for me. All I did was exchange the poison flask I found in Amora for it. Kevin didn't seem to mind anyway. The Gravar style, on the other hand, was a bit easier. As part of the contract, I was to be given a copy of the Gravar style, and that was how I had access to it. Under the terms of the contract, I was not permitted to teach the method to anyone else. That said, I had no intention of teaching it to anyone else in the first place, so everything turned out fine. Now, how do I go about this? As I had previously mentioned, the Keiki style was no longer useful for me to the same extent it was in the past. I had already long surpassed its predecessor, and the same could be said for the Levi Shah and Gravar style. But that was beside the point. Developing my very own signature sword style was at the top of my to-do list right now. I wanted one that was exclusive to me and no one else. And the first step for me to take to accomplish that was to conduct an accurate analysis of the 3 strongest sword manuals known to mankind. I intended to combine the various aspects of each sword style, speed, power, and style into one and create the most powerful and complete sword style out there. For that to happen, I need to completely memorize every single detail of these books. I tapped on my glasses again, and with a serious expression, I began to examine and break down every single thing that was written in the manuals. They say that time flies when one is deeply immersed in something. I guess they weren't exactly lying. I stood up to look at the clock that hung on the right side of my new apartment, 8 p.m. 7 hours had passed before I knew it, and it was already time for dinner. Rubbing my stomach a couple of times, I leaned back on the couch and blankly stared at the white ceiling of the room. What should I have for dinner? The one drawback of moving away from my parents was that I was no longer able to rely on my mother to provide me with warm meals. Instead, I was responsible for preparing my own food. I wasn't a bad cook, but cleaning was a big hassle. Actually, I suppose I could stop by their place and get something to eat from there. I shook my head after deliberating over the matter for the next couple of seconds. It would not be a wise decision to show up unannounced and demand food. Whatever, I'll just order something. I pulled out my phone and began browsing the delivery app in the app's menu. My fingers scrolled down the page a few times before stopping, and my brows knitted together in a frown as I was suddenly brought to remember something. A miniature tube that was filled with a dark liquid materialized in front of my eyes when I tapped my bracelet once. I almost forgot about this. Cyriel's blood. I analyzed the liquid in front of me with seriousness. It had been some time since I had received his blood, and I recalled how he had described the process involving the gradual incorporation of demon blood into my blood. I knew the steps by heart. Incorporating demon blood into my body would not only make me more powerful, but it would also give me access to a skill known as demon transformation, which would give me power beyond anything I could have imagined. However, this did not come without a cost, as there was a very real possibility that I could lose my mind as a consequence of my actions. My hands shook a little when I stared at the tube in front of me. Should I or should I not? I was desperate. Desperate to not be involved with the schemes of the other me, Kevin, Jezebeth, the Akashic Records, or whomever it may be. I didn't want to be a piece in whatever grand game of chess they were playing. Just wanted to be free, you know? Hey, who knows, me taking the demon blood might just as well be something that one of them has planned. I covered my mouth with my hand and bit my palm. But I removed the cap from the test tube, and then carefully transferred the liquid into a cup that was sitting on the table nearby. Click. Who? I was startled to see Amanda enter my apartment after a sudden clicking sound, and I quickly retrieved my hand away and stored the test tube in my dimensional space. What are you doing here? Amanda cocked her head when she spotted me and placed her thin brown jacket on the hanger at the entrance of the room. She then took off her boots. Weren't you the one who told me to come? I did. Don't tell me you forgot. Amanda covered her forehead with her hand. Her face was filled with helplessness, and I lowered my head in embarrassment. Now that I think about it, I do recall telling her yesterday something of the sort. I rubbed my palms together and leaned back on my sofa. I didn't forget. My thoughts were somewhat jumbled because of all the studying that I was doing. Is that so? Amanda approached me as she tied her hair into a ponytail. Her slender neck became exposed the moment she attempted to tie her ponytail behind her head, giving me a sight to behold. Accentuating the curves of her body was her outfit, which was composed of a black turtleneck that was neatly tucked inside of her blue jeans. With her legs on the side of the couch, she sat next to me. A thin purple hairband hung in between her lips. Amanda suddenly smiled seductively upon noticing that I was looking at her. Like what you're seeing? She asked, removing the hairband from her mouth and tying the hair behind her back. I nodded my head. Yes, I do. It would be a lie if I said no. Amanda's expression froze when she heard me agree. What is it? I asked, curious about the sudden shift in her expression. To my shock, I watched as Amanda placed her hand over my head and looked at me with a worried expression. What are you doing? Making sure you're not sick. What makes you think that I'm sick? Amanda ignored Ren and continued to check the temperature of his head. She sighed in relief when she saw that the temperature was normal. It looks like you really don't have a fever. What got into you? Amanda locked eyes with Ren and she deeply stared into his eyes. She didn't hear it wrong, right? Did the stone-hearted idiot actually fall for her charms for once? 2 years. She had been trying for 2 years to become more intimate with him, only to see Rin erect a barrier and keep their relationship the way that it always was. At times she wondered if they really were in a relationship or if Rin truly did like her. Was she not attractive in her eyes? Does he prefer girls that are like Melissa? More mature ones? Her mind raced with all kinds of strange ideas over the course of the 2 years they were together. It was embarrassing to think about, but she couldn't help but doubt herself in front of Rin, who didn't seem to be moved at all despite her efforts to advance their relationship. "Hey, you okay?" Nothing." When Amanda saw Rin wave his hand in front of her face, she instinctively jerked her head backwards. Her reaction caused Rin to be even more confused. "What's gotten into you?" "Nothing." Amanda's eyes darted around in panic, pausing on a small cup on the table that contained a strange black liquid. Looked like coffee at first, but that was only at first. In the instant her eyes paused on the blood, her face changed. That. Ren's face also changed when he noticed what Amanda was looking at, and before he could say anything, Amanda had already stood up. Enough. She could tell at a glance that the object in her hands was dangerous as she detected faint demonic vibrations emanating from the liquid within the cup. "You're planning on doing something dangerous again, aren't you?" Amanda didn't need to look at Ren to come to this conclusion. She knew him like the back of her hand, and it was obvious to her that he was planning on ingesting whatever this liquid was. When Amanda stared at the cup, she experienced a wide range of emotions, including resentment and sadness. She had a momentary urge to throw it and destroy it, but she restrained herself because she knew that Ren was very important to Ren. Biting her lower lip, she sat the cup back down on the table and stared at Ren. What are you doing?" Her mind emptied of all thoughts, and the next thing she knew, she was on top of Ren. She was looking down at him. Amanda found it particularly amusing to see the shocked expression on his face, and her heart started racing. "What are you doing?" Ren asked, his eyes slowly recovering from the shock, and he supported his upper part of his body up. Ignoring Ren, Amanda slowly took off her turtleneck, exposing her body, and softly responded, "Something that I should have done a long time ago." Her lips and his lips met,